Hey guys, welcome back to Diving Deep in Thought. You're here with Elias, and today I want to talk to you guys about willpower and why willpower is so important in our lives to help us propel forward and for progress and growth. So, what is willpower? Well, willpower is our brain's ability to resist temptations that are placed in front of us or temptations that come to our mind. So, some people go about overcoming addictions or temptations by hiding something, hide the chocolates, use an internet blocker, or, hide the console. And what tends to happen is that doesn't solve the problem. It does temporarily, but if you want to solve a problem long term, you have to find the source of the problem. Now, the source of the problem is in your mind. All addictions start in here. They all start in here. So by trying to treat that temptation or addiction by making you physically further away from that product or whatever you're doing that you're trying to avoid, that doesn't help the situation. That if anything, it creates more of a scarcity mindset, and you'll want to go back even more. So what it does is it builds up tension. You don't want to build up tension because it affects other aspects of your life. And how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're going to find a quick fix for one thing, then you're going to try to find a quick fix for everything. So you may as well, raise the bar and do things properly. And the proper way of overcoming temptation and any addiction is to solve the problem in your mind. So it's in your mind where you're feeling the need to have that particular item, or that need to eat junk food, the need to not get out of bed in the morning on time for work, the need to get off the couch to train, the need to study for exams. It all starts in your mind. So there's no point trying to change stuff externally if you haven't changed it internally, so it doesn't create disruption in the other parts of your brain. So the part of the brain that you want to reduce the noise or the internal voice that you hear is the amygdala. It's really, there's two little almond-shaped parts of your brain called the amygdala, and they're basically in the middle, behind your eyes and in line with your ears. And the amygdala is responsible for the fight or flight for threats, and it's responsible for extreme positive or extreme negative emotions, and just emotions in general. It regulates. What the amygdala does is it forms triggers. So it connects an event with a noise or an event with a sound, and it groups them together so that, for example, when you hear a dog barking, that's meant to trigger you. You're meant to be scared and you're meant to run. So if you're scared of dogs, so it's fight or flight. It's for safety. So that's the safety part of your brain. And then the part that we want to strengthen through these next few things I'm going to tell you, these techniques that I'm going to tell you to strengthen, and this is the rational part of the brain. This is the big brain manager, the prefrontal cortex, which is right at the front of the brain. And it's a big part of the top part of your brain. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for managing rational decisions. So the prefrontal cortex is very responsible. The prefrontal cortex is telling you to study for your exam, to go train, to go to work early, to focus on your studies. This is the prefrontal cortex. And to increase the strength of your prefrontal cortex and silence the inner noise in your mind, which, by the way, the amygdala also contributes to anxiety. So I don't know why I just added that. It's not necessary right now. But yeah, the amygdala also influences your anxiety. And all anxiety is, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but I think it's an important one. All anxiety is an emotional, basically, roadblock of your brain. It's a response in your mind that you have to a trigger that your mind can't give you an explanation for, and then you get anxious and your brain floods. And when it floods, you don't move, you don't speak, you're basically frozen. So this will also help with anxiety. So it's a win-win. So the techniques I want to talk to you guys about are the following ones that I've used to overcome the hypothalamus telling me, don't train, don't exercise, don't read, don't do. So, it's the brain's bully aspect. So the first thing that I want to get into is meditation. So meditation is basically silencing the conditions around you, being pretty quiet or focused on one thing so that you can observe your thoughts. And when you observe your thoughts, what tends to happen is your brain organizes the matter and the thoughts more effectively. And what tends to happen is, because temptations are an impulse decision, you feel like, I feel like Macca's, and then you'll go drive there, or you'll get Uber Eats. And what you're doing is you're feeding that temptation. You're feeding an emotion. You're feeding an emotion. That's what it is. And when you feed an emotion, you don't have much thinking time. It's instant, isn't it? It just triggers you. They're triggers. So the time between your action, your thought and your action is very close. When you meditate, what tends to happen is you increase that processing, that time. So the time between my hands is the processing time between your thought and your action. So when you get the idea of eating Macca's, you start to think now, is this part of my long-term goal? And can you see how this ties into all the other aspects of your life? So when you're becoming more responsible, when you're listening to the prefrontal, what tends to happen is, or you grow your prefrontal through meditation, is the distance and the time between your thought and your action is actually extended. That's all meditation is. It's controlling your thoughts and observing your thoughts rather than living out your thoughts. So meditation is very, very powerful. And meditation is one of those practices where you have to practice it on a daily basis, and it doesn't necessarily strengthen equally. So the more you meditate, the bigger the benefits, and it actually compounds. It's very, very powerful. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is taking responsibility and having accountability to know what is the right thing. So doing your research, seeing what you want to actually achieve in your life in terms of your goals or the person you want to be, and taking the right action. Not taking any action. Action is not progress. Any action is not progress. Action toward our goals is progress. And that's how we measure how effectively we are approaching our goals. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is the avoiding a high exposure to screens, which is your phone, TVs, watching too much Netflix, watching too much, playing video games heaps. All these things are feeding the amygdala. They're feeding your emotional center. And what tends to happen is your identity ties so tightly with the amygdala that all these addictive, fast dopamine impulses or dopamine sources, super stimuluses that you get from these different things, what tends to happen is your amygdala keeps saying, I want more, I want more, I want more. And the amygdala it's the spoiled part of the brain. It's not the responsible part. The prefrontal is the responsible part. So the amygdala is like, I want more, I want more. And what you're doing, you're feeding the amygdala. Your body is probably suffering. You're gaining weight. Your eyes are red from video games. You're just not happy. Your prefrontal is not happy, but the amygdala wants more. So you just got to that gap by meditation, and then you got to take the responsible action. The next thing is avoiding snacking. So you got to make a conscious effort to avoid snacking, not hiding your snack. Don't hide things. The willpower is not hiding. We would have called it avoidance. If we don't want to see something, we would have called it avoidance. Or if that was the case, then everyone would be wearing blindfolds. You can't walk around and block the world that you see. You're living in this world. You're the one who's got to be in control. That's where the strength comes in. We're not falling victim to all these different stimulus around us. That's not a good way of thinking about it. You don't want to ever lower your value to cater for the amygdala. You want to implement techniques that you can adopt, so wherever you are, whether you're in a restaurant, in the shops, your temptations aren't being fulfilled on the spot. you want to have control. When you have control, you'll feel a lot better, and your willpower will grow, just like a muscle. So then you got to avoid snacking and highly processed foods. Highly processed foods is the same thing. You're feeding that amygdala, or that high emotional positive state. You're rewarding your body for not doing much, and then it gets very addicted to it. It's not a bad idea just to treat yourself now and again, or to ease off things slowly, but the willpower will be obviously increased by doing these things. The second last thing is exercise. By exercising, it forces you to turn up every day. Every day, go outside, in nature, out in your backyard, do some push-ups, do some squats, do some pull-ups, go for a 15-minute run. Exercise is a really powerful way to strengthen the prefrontal cortex by reducing the overthinking in your mind. It's very hard to overthink when you're running or focused on something out in nature. So you got to get into a calming environment. This is where the environment helps. The other ones are generally internal, where you've got to work on the inside of your brain, but this is something where the environment is helpful, being out in nature and exercising. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about is the most important out of all. If you don't do this one, then you're in trouble, and it's sleep. There's nothing worse than not getting enough sleep and being in a very bad mood. That triggers all the bad habits. If you're tired every single day, you're not going to perform well at work. You're going to eat rubbish food to bring up your mood. You're not going to exercise. You're definitely not going to meditate, because it's not going to seem like a feasible option. So we get dragged into the path of least resistance. When we start to do something bad, it snowballs, and we don't want to do that. And sleep is one of those things where everything above it basically starts to fall apart. Sleep is the most important, I believe, out of everything. And if you don't believe me, get very minimal sleep for a whole week and tell me how your life goes. You will find a million ways to make yourself feel better, and they won't be good. There'll be all the bad things. So sleep is very important. Now, hours of sleep, generally people say 8 hours or 7 hours, but that's up to you. It depends on your demands, the food you eat, your genetics. No one can really tell you. These are all just guides. But definitely get enough rest, and you will find that your life will be so much better. I hope you guys can overcome some of the temptations that you've probably built up over the lockdown. So yeah, these are the techniques that I'm using now still. I'm still using them to get me closer to my goals. And hopefully you can get closer to yours. And that's why I do these videos, so that you can improve. And if you feel like somebody else can also improve, like, subscribe, and share, so it goes out into this virtual universe of YouTube. Thanks, guys.